Attendance, and we'll go ahead and get started. So a little bit of an agenda that we're going through today. We're going to welcome you back. So I know we haven't met in a while and we have some new faces, including my own, that you're probably not used to seeing. So I'll introduce myself and hopefully have GNRC staffers that are on as well. And I see some of you are already reminding us who you are in the chat, which is great. That's how we were going to go through that today. I'm going to give you a brief recap of the roundtable's progress because we haven't met in a while. And so we can review all that we've accomplished together over the last year in this virtual setting. And I want to thank you all again for adapting. I know that we really hoped to have an in-person meeting and some of those had started back, but due to recent conditions, it's best that we just remain virtual for now.
Headphones, but it's not. It's just going through the thing. Anyway, and I'm
So also going to provide a little update on the transportation plan since you all helped with that in February since it was adopted. We also are going to, the main meat of this presentation today will be a comprehensive economic development strategy focus group workshop. So you have a great opportunity to directly engage with our economic and community development team about this regional plan. And then we hope to adjourn by noon. So who I am, I've introduced myself over email and I've actually worked at GNRC for about 2 years now. I was originally on the research and analytics team as a data analyst with Max Baker. And so I've really appreciated a lot of the data sharing that has gone on in this group. But as of late, about a month ago, I switched over to the planning team to help lead the environmental program. So I'm really excited to take on this role as well as coordinate with all of you all. So if you haven't already, please introduce yourself in the chat, separate from the virtual sign-in link. And for GNRC staffers that are online, we're just going to go ahead and say our name and our title. So I guess, Matt, I'll start with you since you're facilitating today.
Good morning, everyone. Matt Von Lunen. I'm with the Economic and Community Development team here at GNRC.
Sean, we'll go to you next since you'll also be presenting today.
Morning, everyone. Good to be back with the Environmental Roundtable. Sean Falzer, Transportation Planning Manager with GNRC, and give you a brief update on transportation planning activities underway at GNRC on the agenda today.
All right, Amy, can you go next?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Amy Napoli. I'm with the Economic and Community Development team here at GNRC.
All right, and Anna, I see that you're online as well.
Yes, Carson. Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Anna Emerson with the Community and Regional Planning team at GNRC.
All right, I'll pass it on to Ashley.
Hi, I'm Ashley Gothcock. I'm a Senior Research Analyst with GNRC.
And Joanna.
Good morning, Joanna McCall. I'm new with the research team at GNRC and excited to be here. I see some names from Tennessee Women in Green, and that doesn't surprise me. So, good morning.
All right, Daniel.
Good morning, everyone. This is Daniel Caparella from GNRC. I'm on the Community Regional Planning team as well.
And Jessica.
Good morning, everybody. This is Jessica Hill with the Director of Community and Regional Planning. Sorry, we had some echo going on. Happy that all of you could join us today.
And so those are the staff that have kind of a direct role today, and any other GNRC staffers are welcome to introduce themselves in the chat just so they everyone knows who's on here. But I just wanted to at least refresh our faces for those that are presenting today. So just a recap of what the Roundtable has accomplished together since being established actually last March 2020. They have had one in-person meeting and then everything shut down. So it's kind of a unique timing for this group. And a reminder that you can always look at Roundtable materials from the past at this link on our website. But overall had about 7 meetings over the last year under the direction of Ben Gramling, a pretty large group, one of our largest stakeholder groups that we engage with about 35 participants from state agencies and different nonprofits in the area, as well as advocacy organizations. And our main work together was towards the regional transportation plan, where again, I said that data sharing, that was a really big part of that, especially in the beginning. And it helped eventually define environmentally sensitive areas, which was a composite of a bunch of different layers, I think about 14 different layers. And all of that informed the project level environmental evaluation criteria and approach for over 350 projects that were included in the regional transportation plan and ultimately received federal funding. And we also got to hear from all of you, some of the great work that you're doing, and we had a few member spotlights. And we also talked about, a potential regional conservation strategy or long-term plan that we might collaborate on, which was kind of where it left off in February. But I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Sean so he can talk to you more about what has happened since the regional transportation plan in our transportation planning side.
Great, thanks, Carson. So yeah, since February, we had the opportunity to meet with y'all, and later that month, we adopted the regional transportation plan that takes us out to 2045. If you go to the next slide, we have on our website an executive summary that I don't think that we had available when we last met. I encourage you to check that out. That distills the larger regional transportation plan into kind of the key topic areas, focusing on a lot of the key issues and trends within our region, currently existing now, and then also continuing to be part of our future kind of top issues that remain on our priority list in the future. It kind of summarizes the key investments that we've made as part of this regional transportation plan, allocated about $10 billion to various project types, including transit, roadway capacity adding projects, greenways and trails, and some of the key takeaways. So I encourage you to check that out. This is the link, and then you can access it on GNRC's website. If you go to the next slide, some of the key takeaways from this were, we recognize that there was more work that we need to do in order to solve our region's problems and issues. And so I think some of those that were highlighted, not only by staff and the roundtables and policy boards, but also from some of the comments that we received in going and meeting with some of the various stakeholders throughout the region, is just more collaborations needed, a broader support and expanding beyond kind of our traditional groups and local officials that we've met with in order to kind of build stronger coalitions to address some of these challenges that are regional in scope. Also just more innovation. I think through the pandemic, developing a plan during the COVID-19 pandemic was interesting. I think we saw some emerging trends that we hope continue into the future, and also got much more access to data at a more granular level that has really shifted, I think, our transportation planning approach moving forward. Traditionally, we looked at data kind of on an annual cycle, and now we are viewing data like as early as last week, whether it be for crashes or real-time traffic congestion. So I think that's really changing kind of the way that we approach some of these problems. And then revenue, I think we can always use additional revenue, but one of the things that emerged or that we highlighted was our dependency in this region on federal funding. And so making sure that as we move forward, identifying those opportunities to identify additional state and local revenue sources to kind of support or supplement that federal funding that's coming to our region. So if you go to the next slide, kind of the transition from working on the regional transportation plan is then we immediately switch gears into developing our work program, which is all of the planning activities that we're going to undertake over the next two federal fiscal years. And so in March, we started the development process for that, and really, kind of taking a lot of that information that we learned, issues that we identified through the regional transportation plan, and trying to figure out through the various types of planning work that we do, how do we address those? And so obviously we're highly engaged in the outreach and engagement efforts. I've talked a little bit about the research and data analysis, which is a heavy focus area of ours. And then policy coordination and funding, not only convening some of those existing boards and committees and roundtables, but as we try and build kind of those stronger collaboration and coalitions of trying to identify additional task forces to and other outreach activities to engage in. And then lastly, the funding. I'll talk a little bit about one opportunity that we have through one of the federal relief bills, but we implement a lot of these investments through the regional transportation plan through our short-term capital program. And so we'll be updating that program this year, and then we'll be identifying any potential opportunities through our set-aside funding grants, and one in particular that I'll highlight that, as I mentioned, through the federal relief bill. If you go to the next slide, we currently, so we worked through that process of identifying what our work is going to look like over the next 2 years. And we currently have it's known as our Transportation Planning Work Program, or UPWP, and it's currently out for public review and comment, also available on our website. There's an opportunity to provide comment on that document, or just submit questions, concerns through this comments at gnrc.org. And our Transportation Policy Board is scheduled to adopt the UPWP at this month's meeting next week. And that will shape the work products over the next 2 years for staff. But I wanted to mention one other thing. So we've talked about kind of our long-term planning and investments through the RTP. We've talked about what we're doing kind of to plan towards addressing those issues through the UPWP. And then lastly, just what kind of investments are we making in the short term. And one opportunity that became available, if you go to the next slide, is I think this was the second of the relief bills that came through the federal government, but this is the CRISA, what we've kind of identified as our COVID relief funds, and identified about $10 billion, I believe, across the country to address COVID-19 impacts related to highway infrastructure programs. And the state of Tennessee got upwards of over $200 million specifically for our state. And within the Nashville region, we got about $8.6 million to GNRC to allocate within our transportation planning region. And so with that $8.6 million, we kicked off a call for projects and received about 30 applications. And through this process, we actually went through kind of a pre-application and then a formal application process, because it's a little bit non-traditional funding source. And we wanted to identify, given that there is a short turnaround for this money to be spent, we wanted to identify projects that could make it through the development process and utilize that money before the deadlines. And so some of the project types that we identified and received through that call for project were roadway safety improvements, transportation technology upgrades, pedestrian improvements, and a number of ADA related improvement projects. A lot of communities identifying ways to implement their ADA transition plans and the deficiencies that they've identified to, upgrade curb ramps and improve intersections. And so we're excited to see a lot of those applications that came in, and I think differed from some of the projects that we received or traditionally received through our other calls for projects. And so staff is currently notified the applicants that can proceed to the full application, and they are currently compiling their full applications, which we'll review and announce grant awards by mid-September. And so stay tuned on that, and we will have future opportunities for funding as well beyond the relief funding. One other opportunity that's on the horizon is our active transportation program that identifies or sets aside funding for bicycle and pedestrian related projects. And so that's also on the horizon. But that's all I have, just to give you a quick update on some of the things that we're involved in on the transportation planning side, and happy to take any questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Sean. Without any questions, we'll go ahead and move into the next portion of our meeting. As I said real briefly in the beginning, I'm Matt Von Lunen. I'm the Chief Economic Development Officer here at GNRC. And really the main reason that we're here is to get y'all's input on our comprehensive economic development strategy. So you've already been introduced to Carson and Daniel. They're going to be helping me out as we kind of keep track of the input that we get from y'all. And everyone else on the GNRC team as well. So we appreciate you guys being here. Just want to let you know that this is this comprehensive economic development strategy. I'm going to keep saying that, or I'm going to use the acronym CEDS because we love acronyms. But we are undertaking a major rewrite to that document right now. It's normally done every 5 years. But we're undertaking it now, kind of given our current economic situation in light of the pandemic. But really, in order for it to fully reflect the economic issues and quality of life issues, everything that's going on in our region, we're trying to get a diverse number of stakeholders, get their input. So we've been meeting with, you'll hear soon about how we've been engaging stakeholders, but that's exactly why we have you here today. So you have been, through the work that you've done with us in the past, identified as key stakeholders to help us out on environmental issues. So we appreciate that. We're going to spend much of the time in a facilitated discussion. So we're going to kind of go over some of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, that kind of stuff. But looking at it through an environmental lens as we consider the economic development needs of our region. So when we get there, it's really going to be a back and forth. I'm going to be prompting you with some questions. We really ask that you help us by participating. You can do that either in the chat or by raising your hand. It's up there on the Teams next to the 3 dots. See the little smiley face with the hand. Raise your hand. We'll check on you and hear what you have to say. Because we definitely want to do this as best as possible. As Carson said, we were hoping to be in person, but situations have changed. So the more feedback, the better. If you have any issues on audio or video, anything like that, let us know in the chat. As I said, we're monitoring that. And so we also want to point out that we are recording this. You can see in the top. It's really just for our note taking, but then also so that we can share it with the members that might not be able to be here. So just wanted to make sure everyone was okay with that. If you have an issue, please let me know. So one thing I do want to highlight, I'm not going to go real deep into the Greater Nashville Regional Council. I know through your work that you've been involved with, that you've been able to get familiar with the work that we do. But I do want to point out, because a lot of the work this body has done is around our Metro Planning Organization, is that they are somewhat different geographies. So the Greater Nashville Regional Council is 13 counties in northern middle Tennessee. You see they're highlighted in navy blue. And so now there's a lot of similarities with those 13 counties and the 7 that are represented in the MPO. But just wanted to let you know that while we're going through this discussion, we're going to be focusing on all 13 of those navy blue counties. So I'll go in this, give you a brief background of the CEDS, or Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. So this is actually required by federal law that our region maintain a comprehensive economic development strategy. I said it's normally updated every 5 years. We are the designated economic development district for Northern Middle Tennessee, which means we have that relationship with the Economic Development Administration, U.S. Department of Commerce, to run that process and hear from our stakeholders and make sure that our region is staying up to date with that planning requirement. So it's been going on for a long time, going back for decades. So you can see our most recent CEDS there, gnrc.org/CEDS. The bottom line is that we know business leaders, mayors, state officials, we all have a shared responsibility to get together and develop a strategy that aligns the policies that we're making and the infrastructure investments that we're promoting are aligned with our region's shared vision for economic growth. Here's some of the reasons why you should care. The whole point of the planning process is to make sure that we're getting out ahead of the game, attracting and retaining jobs, very important in our region. We want to make sure that we're better leveraging public investments, and especially in infrastructure, so that we're doing the best to support economic development and prosperity. But we also want to do that while we're minimizing natural conflicts and keeping in mind the balance between growth and conservation. Another thing that our strategy helps us do is it increases the competitiveness for our region to attract federal and state funding and grant opportunities to our region, and also kind of help as a blueprint to help us recover from economic downturns or major events such as a natural disaster. Like anything required for the federal government, we have some components that are must be included in our CEDS. So we'll go through these just real quickly. It's an economic profile and summary. This is a lot of the work that we get with our fantastic research team. They help us develop this, looking at the data available. A SWOT analysis, which we do with some of our stakeholders. I'll go into that more in the future. And then coming out of that, really defining the goals and objectives for our region to move forward. And then with all that together, we create an action plan. So really laying out specific strategies and performance measures to help us track our progress over the next 5 years. And we actually provide an annual update to EDA, even in between those big updates, to let them know how we're doing. So here's some other things in addition to what's required by the Department of Commerce that we at GNRC think is really important to include in our CEDS. So coordination, making sure that the CEDS document and other regional planning documents, like what Sean just was talking about on the transportation side, as well as others in our aging and disability work and our regional land use planning, et cetera, that they're all aligned. We want to be industry focused. We want to make sure that we're really focusing on those businesses that are the key economic drivers in our region. We want to be mindful of automation. We know that the landscape of work is changing at a rapid pace with technology, and we want to make sure that we have an eye on that as we move forward in our region. Place-based economy. So really just this is a focus on making sure that we're utilizing the assets that we have out in all of our communities and really taking advantage of those, knowing the unique and diverse types of communities we have in our 13 counties and 52 cities. Site development is a very big part of what's driving us. We have a lot of interest in our region, and there's not a lot of places for those projects to land. And so we're trying to make sure that we're working with our state and regional partners to help our communities with that site development. And then broadband. I think we definitely learned, if we hadn't known already in the last 18 months, the importance of having broadband available to everyone and how critical that is to our prosperity. So here's real briefly the process. We're listening and learning from key stakeholders. That's where we are right now. We're actually just, you guys are one of the last focus groups we have. So we're wrapping up that process now, brainstorming our goals and objectives, prioritizing those strategies and actions, I'll go into it a little bit here in a bit, but we have an advisory committee that's helping with those along the way, and then drafting the final document so it can be prepared for our annual meeting of our entire GNRC council come September 23rd. So here we're just give you a background of that stakeholder engagement that we talked about. All the work that we're doing throughout this process is driven by an economic development advisory committee. These are a subset of our whole 93-person council, representing the business interests of our communities. We have mayors from both the county, big city, and small city levels. And then we also have some equity representatives as well to make sure that those perspectives are heard. Stakeholder interviews, focus group surveys. We have a survey out now. If you haven't received it, please let us know. We're trying to drive up as much participation there as possible from individuals. But then also these focus groups like we're doing right now. We've been meeting with a variety of either policy area experts like yourselves, and also business leaders throughout the region. And throughout the way, we've been updating the mayors and those that sit on our GNRC committee to let them know kind of how the process is going along the way, since we're going to be asking them to adopt this here in the next here in September. So I went over this a little bit already, but there are advisory committees made up of those business reps, the social equity reps, and the mayors. And really, they're helping us frame the discussion, establishing those goals, objectives, those priorities that I laid out earlier, and then really serving as ambassadors. If you can, please mute yourself. We'd appreciate it. Thank you. And also asking them to serve as ambassadors come September whenever we ask our full board to approve our strategy. So again, I talked about the survey. Please let us know if you haven't received it. We would love for you to take it and also share it throughout your networks. Make sure we're getting as much feedback as possible. There you can see the focus groups in the 7 industry areas of focus for our region. Everything from advanced manufacturing to making sure that we're hearing from those in agriculture, our strong hospitality and tourism sectors as well. So really working with them to make sure their voices are heard. And then on the policy areas as well, affordable housing, the aging population, and then this group here for environment and resiliency. And after it's all said and done, we get our draft together. It's going to go out for a public comment period as well, just like what Sean was saying earlier on the transportation side. So we hope to get some more feedback once we get that draft out. Alrighty, so now that we got all the background out of the way, we'll go ahead and jump into our focus group discussion. As I said, we can go ahead and keep moving. So the guidelines here is that we want everyone to participate. I'm looking, it looks like we have almost 30 folks on here. And so we definitely want to be, we want to hear from you. We have a great diverse set of people on here, and your feedback is crucial. So if you have a question or a comment, either put it in the chat or go ahead and raise your hand, as I said, up there with the smiley face and the little high five. So we want to make sure that everyone's input is valuable. There's no wrong answers here, obviously. And then we want to also let you know that what's said here stays here. We want you to feel free to voice your opinions about these questions. Know that we're not going to have direct quotes to anyone or anything like that throughout the process. So we just want to really get your input throughout this discussion. So with that, we'll go ahead and move forward. So these are the discussion questions we're going to go through. Definitely want to be aware of the time. We have you out of here. We appreciate that you've committed to 90 minutes. We're going to absolutely do our best to get this wrapped up here within that amount of time so you can get on with your day. But these are the questions that we're going to be going over. What we're going to do here now is that we're going to switch over from the PowerPoint presentation that we've been going through and now go into a Word document where Carson's going to help us kind of keep track of what people are saying throughout the process so that we can be, one, capturing it and making sure that we can expand upon what people are saying. But then also, if we write down something that's not exactly, the way that you meant it or how you wanted it to come across, then we want to make sure that we're getting that right from you. So, nothing else in the way. We'll go ahead and get started. We'll go ahead and say, so what are some of the natural resources or environmental strengths in our region that help make our industries competitive? You can think about some of those industries we were talking about earlier, and whether it be healthcare, manufacturing, tourism. What are some of the strengths in our region from your perspective as an environmental stakeholder that make our region competitive? I know it's always hard to be some of the first to speak up. Once we get rolling, it'll go better, I promise. Feel free to write in the chat. If I don't hear from anyone, I might have to start calling on folks.
I would say open space. I would say that our region has ample amount of green and open space compared to some other regions across the United States. One of the reasons I moved to this area.
Absolutely. No, thank you. That's the exact kind of thing that we're looking from, and we've heard that from members of the business community as well. Anyone else have anything that we feel are really strong natural resources that are attractive for our economic prosperity here?
I'll add that we have abundant supply of fresh water.
Absolutely. Definitely blessed with that, and know a lot of communities struggle there. Anything else that you guys would note as a strength of our region on an environmental or natural resource side?
I would say our geography is diversified. We have very rural, undulating, rolling hills, as well as flat, dense urban spaces.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what would you say? How would you say that is a strength for our region? I guess the diversity is great, but I mean, can you expand a little bit more on some of the benefits that we have from having that type of diversity, please?
Well, if we were in a bowl like Asheville, we would be confined with growth potential. So I think from a growth potential, we have the space, hopefully smart way to grow. So I would say that that's a benefit. I do think that from an architectural standpoint, that because of our geographical diversity, it's more appealing from aesthetics, and hopefully as well as environmental benefits as well if you do it in a smart way.
Absolutely. All right. We had Susanna throw in the chat that we have an advanced stream of wetland mitigations credits and an active in lieu. Is that stream and bank mitigation? I'll admit that I'm a little outside of my normal comfort zone here. So can you give a little bit more background on that, Susanna?
Yes, it is actually for those impacts from the industries that we want within the area to have those advanced credits available. So both wetland credits and stream credits. And in this area, there's a benefit that there are active in lieu fee programs and bank programs. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that's great, because we definitely hear that from those looking to maybe develop a piece of land and trying to be mindful of the economic impact they're having. It's often that they want to do the right thing, they just don't know how. So if the opportunity's there for that, that's really important. Thank you.
Well, having those advanced credits available offers them, improves their schedules.
Yeah.
Without those advanced credits, people, developers, they have to create those themselves.
So you're saying because of our kind of robust credit and bank system that we have, that they're able to maybe get their projects done at a faster rate than perhaps other regions?
Correct.
Okay.
And not necessarily robust, but we do have that. So
Gotcha. Still some room for improvement? Still some room for improvement, you think?
Sure.
Absolutely. Okay, great. No, thank you, Susanna. Stephanie wrote that kind of expanding upon what was said earlier, specifically pointing out the several state parks that we have throughout our region. I think that's absolutely true, and a big benefit we have.
Matt, this is Jim Redwine from Harpeth Conservancy. I think there are lots of folks in the environmental community who would disagree with the concept that the mitigation credits system in the state is working well, and that projects are not getting done, and it is too easy to avoid the priorities that are supposed to apply when it comes to mitigation. You're supposed to avoid, minimize, and then mitigate only in the last resort. There were substantial changes in 2018 to TDEX regulations that many in the environmental community believe, quite frankly, were a step backwards rather than a step forward.
Okay, so yeah, maybe that's a good opportunity, Jim, to move over and say, what can be done. You may have seen Carson write that on the what can we do to preserve or build upon them. So you can want to just maybe expand a little bit more there on what could be done to improve that.
That's probably the subject of a lengthy comment letter, but suffice it to say that it is far too easy to buy one's way out of mitigation and minimization responsibilities, and far too easy to put mitigation projects far away from the site of the impacts, and that needs to be fixed.
And okay. I think one of the things that could be kept in mind for any planning organization is that something that within your area of influence, I think it's, really an opportunity for any local government, for anyone developing, for whoever wants to bring that development in, to, regardless of if it's stream mitigation, wetland mitigation, mitigation for historic properties, mitigation for archaeology, to know that early on, and maybe have those opportunities available for those developers. So again, it's just stream and wetland mitigation is a challenge for sure, but also there's other types of mitigation that in the planning stage to start looking for those opportunities.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would also say that GNRC's role in this should be advocating for the best practices that are going to advance not only development but preserve Tennessee's unique natural heritage. And if we don't seriously take a look at the state's mitigation system and the incentives that they have created through these 2018 changes, we're missing a real opportunity.
So perhaps a way to build upon that would be increased education, especially on the front end for those that are undertaking development projects. Is that fair to say? I don't want to mischaracterize the thing.
Education is fine as far as it goes. Education is not a substitute for good policy.
Yeah. No, thank you, everyone. Anything else that we think we can be doing here in our region to build upon those strengths we were just discussing?
This is Dory. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Hey, sorry, we've had a lot going on this morning, so I'm glad Jim was able to get on. And this may not be the right spot, but our organization's been working more with Nashville, Franklin, and some others that are really starting to grapple with how to incorporate the increased rainfall intensity. In other words, getting at flooding, flood management, cut and fill. I think there's going to be a big rethinking about cut and fill policies and everything else, and not just on the major rivers, but the small streams. So not to assume that current policies are really going to be protecting future citizenry just because we have all of these changes going on with increased rainfall from climate change and things like that. So this may not fit here, but I just think that, assuming we just build to where the floodway is not really going to be very protective of property owners.
Absolutely. No, thank you for sharing, and keep that in your back pocket because we want to capture it, but we have discussion here coming up pretty soon specifically on resiliency, and we definitely want to grab that at the right point in time. So, best practices and work on that. That's exactly what we want to hear. So thank you. All right. Anything else we want to be thinking about that we can be building upon? So, all right, well, we'll go ahead and move on to our next questions. Again, want to be mindful of everyone's time. So what are the major environmental or development constraints or barriers to impact that our industries have that are kind of giving them a competitive advantage? We were talking about the mitigation credit issue and the in lieu bank and that perspective. So we definitely understand that from an ease of getting projects moved forward, and that's not always shouldn't be the only goal. So we definitely want to capture that. But what are some other barriers to impact that you think might be affecting our industries?
So this is Dory. I have a different angle. See if this is what you're looking for. It has to do with drinking water supply. Most of Middle Tennessee, most of Tennessee is on rural drinking water systems. Expenses are going up as they meet Safe Drinking Water Act requirements. There's also pressures on setting up new drinking water systems. So anyway, there's that sort of that underlying infrastructure, especially in drinking water.
Okay, so perhaps I want to make sure getting that right. So is it the age of the infrastructure? Is it its capacity? Is it its service level?
Good point. It's probably a couple of things because most of them, when I say rural, they're very small, not in terms of geography, but in how many customers they have. Mm-hmm. So the expense per customer, and as these are aging, there is, I think there are over 400 different drinking water utilities in the state of Tennessee. TAUD will know those specifics, the Tennessee Association of Utility Districts. But there really probably is a need for more regionalization of both producing drinking water, but then distribution. So as you were just saying, a lot of them do have lots of I&I, so they have aging problems. They're losing water, and then it costs a lot of money because there's the lines. There's a term for it, but how many customers per length of line? So they don't have the type of customer base to really. And so people are getting sticker shock when infrastructure needs to be improved and upgraded because there aren't that many customers.
Yeah.
And also there aren't that many very large reservoirs and rivers. And so a lot of them are on very small rivers, and the state will be managing them more in terms of limits on how much can be withdrawn. So I think the growth in the larger region is really going to all of a sudden discover that one of the biggest challenges we have is there's a lot of small rural drinking water systems. Are not well connected. They don't provide each other backup. There's all kinds of stuff. So infrastructure, aging, they're small. So in other words, they have a small number of customers. So you can't just come in and do a huge apartment complex when you start off with, they have 3,000 customers and you're going to all of a sudden up their customer base by a quarter.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Northern Murray County, for example, is dealing with that right now.
Yeah, they've seen some tremendous growth for sure here in the last last decade or so. So.
And so some of it, even though there's an engineering side, it might also get to utility law and some other things. That's why it's not an easy thing to fix, but some of the merging might be very helpful in the long run in terms of cost benefits.
Okay.
If I can build on what Dory's saying, this is Mikhail. I think it's pre-planning communities with these sort of infrastructure needs in mind, and not building the community and then figuring out the infrastructure afterwards. So it's sort of a strengthening of land use and development practices, planning in advance of the population growth, I think, is something that would help us a lot and maybe right now detrimental.
Yeah, thank you, Mikhail. That's right. That's a great way of saying it, because a lot of the local land use rules and zoning, or even the local ordinances. So there's a whole combination of things that go together. And drinking water just popped into my head. Mikhail did a better job of explaining it.
Excellent. So yeah, so that's kind of all about the.
We can tag team.
There you go, and we appreciate it. So that's really focusing on, is it fair to say then maybe making sure that we're aligning the densities and the land use along with the strengths of our current infrastructure assets? Is that another way of possibly putting what y'all are saying? If not, let me know, please.
No, that is good. I think that's a good way of saying it. That makes sense. It also begs the question, where all do we really need high density drinking water infrastructure, let's say, or like, are there areas, if we want them to stay rural, then maybe some of the infrastructure is just fine and some of the local ordinance systems work well. So that's why it's a bit of a chicken and an egg thing. So where do we want the density is a very important thing to figure out. And maybe one way of looking at it is where can we service it?
Yeah, I agree with.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. We're kind of walking back and forth here on the constraints and also some ways that we might be able to attack those. I know some of this stuff might be even longer than a 3 to 5 year window. We certainly understand that. The reason we have that as our long term is because this is a 5-year strategy. So we definitely don't want to, we don't want to be too nearsighted, but we also want to make sure that we're aligning everything. But no, I think that there's some great opportunities in planning from the utility district side as well. We'll go ahead. We'll kind of stay with both of them. Are there any other constraints out there that we think from an economic development perspective we need to be mindful of that might be affecting especially business? Certainly, residential growth is a big driver as well. But just want to make sure we're grabbing that before moving into possibly some ways that we can go after some of these barriers and some of these problems.
So speaking of utilities, this is Laurel again with Metro Nashville and energy, specifically electricity. So businesses are looking to go 100% renewable in the very near future, if not potentially net zero in their built environment. And given there are constraints being the TVA Valley, where first of all, TVA does not permit net metering. Therefore, you have to either A, do renewable energy on site behind the meter, or you have to participate in TVA's Green Invest program and therefore pay a premium in order to get your renewable energy credits to meet your goals. That could be not desirable from entities that are moving here and have aggressive renewable energy goals. And so that's a constraint for sure.
No, thank you. So they're perhaps looking at some of the ways to remove those barriers. Is it perhaps working with TVA on those on the net metering issues, or figuring out ways to show the economic in the business development case for having an affordable renewable energy credit?
Yes, and for the entity to be able to produce their own renewable energy without having to pay premium to the utility.
Okay. No, thank you.
And to pick up on what Laura just brought up, if you don't have another square on this, obviously it's waste management. We've got, we have that whole big issue, monster issue here as well. Landfill space is tight, recycling, and all those other ancillary issues. Nashville in this area is woefully behind, so that's a constraint, obviously. But I'm not working in that space. I know there are lots of other people who are, as far as where are we and what would be the incentives.
No, I think that's a great point as well. We can definitely look at that as a constraint for our ability to attract new businesses. That might actually be a good time to transition into the environmental threats that are facing our region, and maybe talk about that a little bit more in detail. If someone want to tackle our solid waste challenges or give us a little bit of a perspective?
Well, with solid waste you're talking about, the obvious issue is capacity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what are we going to do to reduce the use of existing landfill space?
No, thank you, Jim. I know that's we hear. I mean, a lot of these things that you're bringing up, we definitely hear from our mayors on our council, and the solid waste issue has definitely gotten them motivated here in the last few years, especially in our region with Middle Point. But I think that it's might be fair to say an issue across our state.
Well, I know that, Jim, I think we all probably, if you're reading the Tennessean anything, you'll see a lot of this, but there's so much more to it. So we have capacity issues, but we could probably, and I don't want to be crass, find another poor rural county who will let us build another landfill, but that's really not the answer. And there's a lot of industry out there that knows how to take various parts of our waste stream and reuse it and repurpose it. So I don't know if there's barriers to entry for those types of industries, those types of businesses, but it might be could be because if it's easy to toss it, you see what I'm saying? Like the economics have not incentivized some of these other specialty waste management businesses to be here. And Laurel's right. A lot of these big companies are looking for all of that. They want as much zero footprint as possible.
Right. We don't have any real product stewardship laws in Tennessee. That runs everything from container deposits to plastic bags to tire recycling, all of which ends up in places it shouldn't. And as a result, if we're talking about environmental best practices and preserving the unique natural heritage of Tennessee, that those things don't contribute to it.
No, thank you, Jim. We made sure to put that in our short-term and long-term ways to address these challenges. All right. Anything else from well, maybe we can go ahead into we talked about the threats that we exist that might hurt us and our ability to attract businesses, especially those that are trying to move in a greener direction. But what are some of the development pressures that you think that are out there right now that can really start leading to some negative impact on our natural resources?
Tree canopy loss, which I'm sure many on this call can talk about. That's a real serious issue. We are drastically losing our tree canopy in Davidson County and the other regions surrounding us, and that's going to become, obviously that affects adaptation and resiliency efforts, and can really cause more shocks and disasters to be worse than they possibly could be if we had a strong tree canopy. But I also think that from a desirable standpoint, the more barren our city is and leading to poor air quality of life is going to really impact our region's ability to attract business and economic development.
Now, I'm really glad you brought that up, Laurel. We've heard quality of life in a lot of our focus groups. And one thing I love about that is that it means something different to everyone. And so I guess I was hoping you might be able to maybe give your perspective there on the environmental, how the environment and our natural resources can or is contributing to our quality of life, and how we need to be mindful of the development pressures on that, just a little bit more in depth.
Well, I can start, but I know many on this call can color it in much more. I mean, obviously, I mentioned trees, number one. Number two, the water quality that Mikhail mentioned, the importance of that, as well as our healthy system of blueways that really contributes to many different aspects of a quality of life. Having a walkable, safe areas for our visitors and residents and employees to be able to feel comfortable walking and biking to their destinations is contributes to, you know, a stronger quality of life. And just generally having green space and open space, as mentioned, our strong state park system, as well as Metro National has a strong city park system and open space and greenway system, and having that accessibility and having that be a clean and safe place for visitors to go to is important. So that's just a stab at it, but I know there's many others who can color in more.
I'd like to jump in because what Laura just gave us, if you will, is kind of like, if you're in the city, what are you thinking? So I'm going to bring the perspective of what we also really need. Tree canopies might be a way of expressing it in the city, but we need our agricultural and forest lands. And you can live in Nashville and go to a rural area pretty quickly within 30 minutes. That's huge. You can't do that in San Francisco and in New York City and Chicago. So, and that means the other counties are trying to figure out how to maintain those kind of rural areas. It doesn't have to be a 500-acre farm, but the look is different. And the access, like farmers markets. So what I was thinking about when you asked the question is, we are getting a lot of what I call the cookie cutter development. Once a development company figures out how to do a certain style of commercial residential development, they want to do it everywhere they can, as opposed to kind of thinking about the customized variety. And what we're really needing is some of the more lower density, more rural, people with smaller houses and larger pieces of property. They don't need a McMansion. They want a small house because they would like to have 4 acres for a mini farm. So trying to be more aware of the different types of markets, and the markets for different types of way people want to live and want to be able to live and work. And it all blends together is what I'm trying to say, you know, because there's lots of ways that we have to get at keeping the land cooler, our trees and all of that. But a lot of it is also Williamson County right now, Franklin, all that are really trying to look at their urban land laws and go, how can we integrate keeping farmland? So anyway, it's a blend, and it's been very interesting. It's almost like we're all talking in different worlds, but we're all interconnected. So thought I'd throw that out there.
No, thank you. That's a very good point. We hear, you know, forest land preservation, farmland preservation. Do we have anyone from the kind of the ag side on here that might be able to go more in depth on the farmland preservation side, or some of those development pressures that you're hearing from those involved in agriculture? If not, that's okay. I just want to make sure we're getting that perspective as well. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and keep running. Again, want to make sure we're it's respectful of everyone's time. So now we're going to hop into, I gave a little bit of a precursor here earlier, and it's been mentioned already a few times, but what can we be doing to be more resilient to both economic shocks and natural disasters? So this is Dory brought up something a little bit earlier. I'll say now's your time to go, but be thinking about those. I know there's you know, Laurel also mentioned the impact of tree canopy and whatnot on stormwater. We can dig into that too, but start thinking about those while we give Dory the chance to give her resiliency comment.
Well, I think you've already heard it, but you're right. One of the big resiliency things would be designing these communities so that they're resilient to the flooding changes that are coming. They're all tied to increased rainfall intensity. So we can call it flooding if you want, stormwater management. That doesn't solve and reduce the climate impacts, which is really, it's just responding to it. I think that as a community though, and as a big city community, it's like, what all can we do to actually help reduce carbon footprint? You know, and that's a whole different animal. And I do think some of these bigger companies are looking for that. But we are remiss in the next year. I mean, I know that Nashville's already going to probably reach out to CDM Smith and go, okay, crunch the numbers. How much water hits us now in a 2-inch rain? I mean, in a 24-hour rain event. We've got to get those rules and regs updated ASAP. But that doesn't necessarily solve the problem of how can we minimize, you know, those climate changes.
Yep.
Some of them are already.
Yeah, that really goes back to as well, Matt, the whole issue of mitigation and riparian buffers and placement of those in ways to mitigate you know, the impacts of the development that's actually occurring where it's needed, not far away, not counties and watersheds away from where the actual impacts are.
Absolutely, thank you. I think we're hearing some good stormwater and heavy rain event discussion. What else we want to be thinking about from a resiliency standpoint?
This is very different, and this is not our area of expertise, but we all know that there's a very important ethical issue in terms of gentrification. And I know every community, some of the communities are really wrestling with how do they go about encouraging what they call workforce housing, whatever it is. But, you know, there's so much money and people are moving to this area and it's sort of swamping other needs to some extent that these communities have. So I'm just throwing that out there. I mean, resiliency is, I don't know if that fits. Y'all who talk in the resiliency world, does it intellectually fit there? But, you know, the average household, I think the average house cost in Franklin is, you know, $350,000 or even higher. So building more apartments and condos that are expensive doesn't help us with workforce housing.
No, I think, I mean, that's the purpose of this is definitely not just natural disasters, because we have economic shocks up there as well. And so we can, I would love to kind of get some other viewpoints on that. We heard from a lot of our focus groups, especially in industry, about the housing prices and issues we have in our region. I'd love y'all's input as well on those areas and how that might affect our community's ability to be resilient in light of an economic shock.
Well, I'm thinking from a metro national perspective, I think very much related to policy, and two important things is about ensuring that we are not giving variances for built infrastructures and floodways, and that we are very, very, very protective of our floodplains and what is permitted to be built there. And I had mentioned tree canopy, but along with that really is green infrastructure. The larger picture, not just tree canopy, but green infrastructure and the vitalness of being able to protect and grow green infrastructure as much as possible, especially in these areas that are prone to flooding events. And then on the other side of things is around codes and codes compliance and the importance of having updated codes, requirements, energy codes, IECC code requirements, and not only just that they are passed, but they also are enforced, so that when there is a large tornado, that hopefully it's not going to be as destructive as it possibly could be if those facilities weren't built to compliance.
No, thank you,
Yeah,
Laurel.
Laurel's onto something there in terms of just thinking about the currently built housing that might be then other people keep purchasing it because we're talking about workforce and other resilient, but if some of that stuff is not safe. I mean, we saw what happened in East Nashville, obviously through the tornadoes. So we have a real safety issue with a lot of our older structures, and I don't want to justify that with tear it all down and build new stuff that nobody can afford except the uber wealthy. But that's the dynamic of what we're all wrestling with. One of many things.
Thank you. And everyone, please feel free if, you can definitely write in the chat as well, other things that you think should be brought up as we go through this process. But is there anything else from a resiliency standpoint that we should make sure we're capturing in this planning document before we move along?
I'll just chime in this is Holly from the SHPO with historic preservation, along the lines of gentrification. And, we just always push that. I think, you have a good idea of what you've got. And so just in having the most up-to-date survey, so you know what's historic, what should be preserved, what areas are ripe to use historic tax credits. The governor's there's economic development grant that was this year. What you have that could take advantage of those resources.
Yeah, I heard the demand for that grant was pretty high. They
went fast. So
yeah.
It was.
So we'll see if maybe that moves some policymakers to show that level of interest. We heard from a few of our communities, and by the time we got on there, I said we're full.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll get to do it again next year. So
yeah. No, thank you for sharing, Holly.
I was just going to mention diversified energy sources. So if you're 100% dependent on the grid, if a storm comes through, being able to have battery stored energy and or renewable energy to fall back on is another resiliency aspect that's important, not only important to our region, but I think businesses are looking for that just to make sure that their services and production can continue during a disaster.
Thank you. Alrighty, everyone. We will go ahead and keep running. We got 2 more questions to go. We'll give you the rest of your day back. We'll go ahead and start out with, what do you think are some of the untapped or underutilized opportunities we have to balance economic development and environmental quality? So we know sometimes those two can be at odds at each other. But what are some things that maybe are, and this kind of leans into the other one too, but maybe some best practices or things that you think are small pilot programs that could be expanded. We were just kind of talking about that on the historic preservation side, but love y'all's input on that.
Well, this is Dory. I'm going to chime in, and I saw Sam Williams' comment too. I think that we're untapped in finding ways to incentivize maintaining a rural landscape that's in working land. There's a huge need for people to learn how to manage their woodlands, for example, better, and their agricultural lands and all of that. But the point is, right now we've kind of got every mayor and everybody thinking the only way best highest use is to develop it to get tax dollars. So that's kind of like, but people really value driving out to Leapers Fork and going to these other places that are rural. And so there's a horse industry. There's all kinds of things out there that use land differently that people like. Race cars. I mean, pick all your different reasons why people want to come to Nashville and to this region. There's a lot of variety out there, and some of the rural areas offer you the opportunity to do things you can't do in a hyper urban environment. But all I'm getting at is that we really don't have any economic incentive programs, or I don't know what it is, but pilot projects that would help with going, oh, here's some other ways that we can actually provide economic value, but it may not always look like it's tax dollars from that property. It could be the multiplier effect from the ag marketing industry, or anyway, all that kind of stuff. That's what Franklin and Williamson County are looking at right now, or some of these agri-hoods and things like that. So
I think
go ahead, please, Jim.
Oh, sorry, man. To expand on that a bit, one of the areas that one of the things that most areas don't do well is make development pay its own way. All or most of their costs, and I trust most folks here are familiar with the work that the Strong Towns organization has done. If not, I would encourage folks to find that and to look at their suggestions as ways to make sure that development is beneficial for everybody.
No, thanks for sharing, Jim. Yeah, I'm just kind of getting a little educated there on the strong towns through our partners at Cumberland Region Tomorrow. And that's kind of learning through that process. Sean, I see your hands raised. What do you have?
Yeah, just to echo on Jim's point, we are going to be undertaking a regional study, the title to be determined, but traffic impacts, looking at that concept which you described, which is how do we manage growth and development and balance the transportation and land use in order to ensure that we are accommodating that growth and being able to pay for the transportation investments that are necessary to support it. So stay tuned for that effort as that will kick off in the coming year.
Thank you, Sean. All right. Anyone else have? We can go ahead. You can see Carson's here kind of writing on both sides. These two questions really are kind of in tandem. Some of the, what's the underutilized opportunities we have here in our region, and then policies or incentives that we, maybe this is a good opportunity to bring up those best practices that your organizations might be seeing in other regions and other states. It might be a good time to get those mentioned as well.
Yeah, so if you want to use a buzzword, you could say agrihood. I'm not saying it all encompassing, but that's a terminology at the land use and zoning and ordinance level. But I know a little bit more because I've been dabbling more in the ag side, but it's hard to have farmers markets and produce organic beef if you don't have, let's say, a place to process your meat. So what's happening is we're losing some of those things that support these various industries too, and that would pick your topic. So I think that's one of we need some people who understand their different industries, to tell us what they need in the back, behind the scenes, because that's where the legislature can step in. Like Laura had pointed out with, net metering with TVA. Some of these things require some sort of institutional fix or legislative fix, and would not be that hard to do if we could demonstrating that there's a real regional value to it. So I think we're all just realizing now that some of the stuff we've all known for a long time, we probably have enough momentum now to get some of it accomplished.
So can you actually go ahead and give us, the whole group, a bit of one or two sentence definition on an agrihood? I heard this term last night for the first time up in Robertson County. So
I'm sorry.
I heard, no. And again, I'm the minority here. I bet a lot of the folks here in the Environmental Roundtable are more familiar with it than I am, but just want to make sure that I'm capturing your definition correctly.
Yeah, I'm using a term that I think they might have coined out of a Serenbe, which I think might have been out of Georgia, but it's essentially a concept where you may have a development, but it's based around an agricultural production. So you're maintaining agricultural production. And so in the case of this one being proposed in Franklin, the small little commercial area is for selling the jellies and agricultural related things. You have a large hunk of property that is maintained, like as Sam was pointing out, so this will be maintained in either agricultural production or wildflowers or whatever they're producing. And so you have more dense, it takes something that might have been, let's say, 1 unit to the acre, and you're putting the development in the footprint in a more concentrated area, and having more, and not having the rural open space be the floodplain. It's already there, but actually something that could have been developed actually to be agricultural production. It could be horses, it could be cattle. But what we tend to see with our conservation subdivisions is whatever you couldn't build on, which was the hillside or the floodplain, then we cram everything else on the buildable space. This is a move to try and take some of the buildable space and keep it in land, as opposed to hard surfaces.
Awesome. No, thank you very much. And I thought Shelley just added some information about them, about agrihoods from ULI in the chat. So no, it's fascinating. As I said, I wasn't even 24 hours ago I heard this term, so now it's twice, and so that's interesting.
Yeah, and I should add that there are some efforts afoot in Nashville to bring those kinds of concepts to some of the areas in Nashville that I would probably best describe as exurbs, and those areas, the issue really revolves around in the Nashville proposal whether the use of these agri-hood conservation communities are going to be they're going to allow greater density to facilitate their adoption or not, and there are those in the environmental community who disagree that granting additional density in return for preservation of some of this property is appropriate. So it needs to be watched.
Okay. No, thank you. Is that, would you say that that's just within Davidson County, or are you saying, you said exurbs? I just want to make sure we're capturing that correct.
Yeah, that's within Davidson County. The concept is one that is in use throughout the area, particularly in Williamson County. I think Dory can expand on this better than I, but the concern is that one of the major concerns is that it's that undevelopable land is not considered in the in determining what density can be allowed on the property that is developable. So, and that may be more depth than we need for these purposes, but it is an issue to watch just to make sure that we're not overly densifying areas.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Any other best practices that we want to have noted here? Things to consider as we take this information up to our advisory committee and begin drafting our strategy.
Other cities, this is Laurel again, other cities have passed requirements around green or passive buildings. So the built environment has less of a carbon footprint, and typically not only is the energy consumption reduced, but also the green infrastructure is enhanced surrounding that facility to utilize the cooling from trees, et cetera. So that would be one thing I would think would be of interest to look at other cities that have done that. If you can't pass a requirement, you could do an incentive around that.
Well, that's excellent comment on heat islands and avoiding those in the process of increasing the transportation.
Yeah, so I was going to say, we really haven't talked at all about transportation throughout our conversation today. That's in Davidson County, that's our #1 emitter of greenhouse gas emissions is the transportation sector. I know that GNRC does a lot of work around transportation, but I feel like that in itself could be an element in every single one of these sections that we've discussed today.
Yeah, Laura, I was thinking the same thing, and since I jumped on 30 minutes late, I didn't want to open my mouth. I already opened my mouth too much anyway, but this is the real challenge for this area is how much can we with incentives kind of do, there's a lot of, I know Middle Tennessee Electric and others are trying to lay lines so that you can have more internet so people don't have to drive and all this. But this is a very spread out community. We're not going to be putting in whole lots of trains and subways. So we might still have more driving than others, but can we do less? And most people are driving to their kids to school. There's all that stuff that are interrelated. And especially with like education and so forth. So this is a very driver centric area of the country. And that's good. Laura's put her finger on it. How are we going to address that? Because that is where most of greenhouse gases come from around here. It's probably one of the overarching issues we deal with, I would say, in terms of the environment.
I think it's great that it came up here in the waning minutes of our meeting, because I think I can confidently say that that housing and transportation has now come up in all of our focus groups. And so, no, that is definitely a point well taken here. And we want to make sure that we're relating that up the levels. All right, well, we'll let Carson finish up her notes here, and then we'll pop back over to our presentation and get you guys back to your days. So here we go. Just as I said earlier, we're taking all this information, summarizing it, and sharing it with our advisory committee. And so that's all information is going to be included in the report to show the stakeholder feedback that we've gotten from this great group. So it really is going to help shape the goals and strategies. We have a meeting of that committee this Friday, actually. So we're getting all of this summarized together over for them to digest and help with guiding the document. We are running on getting this thing written and out for draft. We should have it done by the 23rd. So I think 2 Mondays from now. So when that gets out there for public comment, we definitely want we'll let everyone know, and definitely want to get feedback on the draft document as well before we take it to our final vote of our entire board. I will point out, if you have anything else, maybe you didn't get the chance to say something, but something pops into your mind later on that was triggered by this conversation, please reach out to my coworker Angie Hubbard. Her email address is there. We're having everything go to one email address to kind of keep tabs on it. And again, I'll mention the stakeholder survey. Please make sure that you have the opportunity to fill that out and share it within your networks if you haven't already. Let us know. We can share that with you and make sure that you have access to that. So with that, we'll go ahead. I think Carson's gonna close us out.
So just so those were the next steps for the CEDS, or the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. And just as a next steps for this group, I know that we have been typically meeting monthly, but I think that we're planning on switching to a quarterly meeting format, at least for the remainder of this year, as the holidays approach in the fall. So we will not be meeting in September. However, we will be communicating with you about the draft and feedback, et cetera, before it is adopted in September. But expect a next meeting in around October. Usually the first Wednesday of the month is when we have been meeting. And then, in that time between now and then, or possibly after that meeting, we're also going to be sending out a member survey. Since we've had some staff changes, we haven't met in a while, and we're kind of resetting on this group. We want to better evaluate a long-term vision and goals for participation, membership, and potential activities that you all want to get out of being a part of this group, as well as how that aligns with what we want out of this relationship, and just make sure that it's valuable to everyone's time, and that everyone continues wanting to participate, and kind of the frequency and size of those meetings. So that's all to come, a lot of surveying, but really, really appreciate all the time that you guys spent with us today, especially all the economic development feedback. It's definitely really interesting to hear. So really appreciate your attendance, and we've got you out of here a little bit early. So everybody have a great day, and hope to eventually meet you in person.